I've done a lot of testing, but I think today we're mostly going to talk about why the Retroid Pocket Classic dethrones the Miyoo Mini Plus as the GOAT of vertical emulation. Now, it may even be the vertical GOAT of all time of vertical gaming, and that's saying a lot. But the thing is, we've got the original DMG, which is just super special, nostalgic, and beautiful. And then we've got FPGA, we've got the analog pocket, we've got this funny playing device. We've got quite a lot of contenders. We've got the RGB20SX, which I really like with the 1x1 screen. The old Anbernic RG, whatever this is, was a really 351V, I think it was. Very, very nice, and it got a very nostalgic Game Boy DMG vibe. And we've got this, this is a lovely device. This is the one by Anbernic, the RG40XXV, and I really like this. This is a very good contender. If you're looking for something that's beautifully designed and minimalist, this is a very serious contender against the Retroid Pocket Classic. But we're gonna go through all the things with this handheld, why I think it is the GOAT. There are a lot of caveats to that. There are a lot of things that you will need to consider whether this is the GOAT for you, especially when it comes to price. But let's get into it. Firstly, if you buy this thing, there is a cheaper version, the 4GB version. It comes with 64 gigabytes of storage. This is the 6GB RAM version, which comes with 128 gigabytes of storage, and I highly recommend getting this. When it comes to doing like my setup guide, I've been, not for all devices, but I have been converted to the emulation station for Android option as a front end, and this thing just shines. You can see that that's beautiful, but I highly recommend just going for that slightly more expensive option. Now, if we're talking about vertical handhelds, you'll see that I have a video about the RGB20SX and modding it. Now, I have a new video coming up soon, and the people that help me with these mods are PCBWay. Now, what's great about them is that I send off the specs. I send off like the new one. I want to do a see-through purple, like a atomic purple look. I just send the specs on their website. I go through and I like choose the things that I want. And then when you change it, it puts the price up, it puts the price down, so you can work within your budget. And then once you send it off, the crew at PCBWay will get back to you and say, well, this doesn't work, that does work, we can't make this, we can make that, and they talk to you a little bit, and then they confirm the order. Now, once the order is confirmed, you can actually watch the process of it being made. They keep it up to date on the websites, and then they post it off to you. So look out for that video, and also thank you PCBWay for supporting this channel. I really appreciate it. They've been with me for a while. They are a great place to do the mods that we do as retro gamers. Now, the screen. Let's talk about the screen. Apparently, this is the same screen as the Neo DMG, which is it goes up to like 500 and something, maybe even $600. It's a very expensive device. Apparently it has the same screen. This is a 1240 by 1080, 60 FPS, 3.9-inch screen. It's almost 8x7. So there are arguments online if you look it up. I'm a bit of a 4x3 fan for like NES, but the actual video that comes out of the games when they extract it into a ROM is 8x7 on SNES. I know that SNES is 8x7, but a lot of the games were stretched to 4x3. So depending on the game, you'll see some games like Super Mario, some of the coins are oval if you play it in 8x7, but if you stretch it to 4x3, they're circular. So depends on the game, but I have been playing everything at 8x7 on here just to go with this screen, and it works. I mean, it's really nice. Like I said, I am actually a 4x3 kind of a guy, but you know, maybe it's copium. They talk about copium, but I don't know. The screen is beautiful, and the thing is, it's also the color of the screen. It just makes everything pop when you put your filters on, the deep blacks, because filters will often put like a pixelation, so they will create like very small black lines to make it look like pixels. And this high density pixel rate and the deep blacks of AMOLED and all of that just make everything pop. And then in terms of brightness and dimness, I did what's called a PWM test, where they use a thing to help with the dimness, to make it dim. And when I put it at a low brightness setting, when I drop the brightness, it's already quite dim. When I dropped the brightness and I did a PWM test, it was very minimal. That flickering can cause strain on your eyes. But as soon as I like put it anywhere towards the middle, it was very low on the PWM test. But as you'll see, the brightness is very bright until the very last little bit of the sort of slider, and but it does go very dim at the lowest setting. I think it actually switches the backlighting off. I'm not sure, but it's very, very dark, and then it goes super bright. So you're all set in terms of brightness. Now, like I said, it's not exactly 8x7, so you will see little black bars here and there with pretty much everything you emulate. So what's funny about the screen is it's not a perfect emulation screen. Like on paper, like if I had researched the screen, I would have said, oh, it's not quite right, let's not use it. But you can definitely stretch it without seeing too much strangeness. What I like to do is go into my video settings and use this 1x1 PAR. It gives me a warm feeling in my heart to know that I am rendering the game as it was meant to be rendered from the original cartridge. I am strange, but a lot of people just stretch it. Here's the thing, and people got really upset with me at one point, especially when I spoke about it about the RP Mini, is these games were made to be stretched on CRT screens. They were rendered at 8x7 and then stretched onto a 4x3 screen. They were never designed to be perfect. Like, they just weren't. Like, people argue with me all the time, but they just weren't. They were like a there or thereabouts kind of system. And so, you know, for me, I can sleep at night having these black bars because I know that it's being rendered correctly. So even though I'm moaning about people saying it isn't correct, I like it being correct. But you can stretch it. That's what I'm trying to say. One last thing I will say about the screen is that when I can't find any examples now, but when I was looking at things, so here's a good example. I was watching a YouTube short, and I didn't realize I was watching shorts. I just thought that this video looked very odd, but it will crop the shorts like this. So even if I tap on it, yeah, this is how it plays it. Let's see if I get the shorts here. Yeah, playing a bit of Auntie Donna, and it just stretches it. So there's a lot of instances in Android where it's going to pull the screen to fit into this sort of squarish screen, and you're going to get things messed up. So it's not a perfect system in terms of the screen, but in terms of playing retro games, it really is quite special. Yeah, it really is nice. Now, the next thing that pushes this device up as a goat of the vertical emulation scene is the fact that it has this, it's the G1 Gen 2. I don't know why it says Gen 2 because it's a new chip. Anyway, it was designed for cloud gaming, and Qualcomm's website says cloud gaming with no fan. So therein lies a little secret here, is this chipset was designed not to work with a fan, and so it is super efficient. It's more on the CPU side and not so much on the GPU side. And therein lies another secret, because a lot of our games are mostly just using CPU. You know, the more we get into like the 3D games, that's where it starts to run into trouble. And so when you hit like Switch games and you hit like the 3D games on GameCube and PS2, that's when you start hitting a wall. But for instance, Sega Saturn plays surprisingly well on here. And N64, which is a 3D system, plays surprisingly well on here. I kind of think that Retroid even are surprised at how well this chipset works because of the price. Like, this handheld is sitting at, what, $129? And so I don't think they were expecting it to perform as well as it does. And we'll talk about that a bit more later. But now the problem is, this chipset is more powerful than we expected, but it doesn't have joysticks, nor does it have video out. Now, I have a theory. Okay, the chipset doesn't come with video out, and so it was always going to be limited to not having video out. But I have a theory that Retroid are starting to segment their markets. Now, this has been happening in other industries for years. Like the Retroid Pocket Mini, they chopped that screen down to a 4x3 because they wanted it to be a 4x3 because they didn't want it to encroach on the market for this device, and they didn't want it to encroach on the market for the Retroid Pocket 5, which is a 16:9 screen. And they priced the Retroid Pocket Mini at a premium at $199 because they forced it into a hole of being the only 4x3 OLED screen at its size, like, in the world. So I think they are segmenting their devices now. They are crippling this device by not having video out and not having a joystick so that it is very specific to a very specific audience. So it's not a one and done device. We're all looking for one and done devices, but that is going to limit the longevity of the company, because if they make one thing that works for everyone. I remember in the olden days, the Ford Cortina, this is a story my uncle told me, is that it was taken off the market because it was flooding the market because everyone was buying it because it was kind of like the one and done car of the day. And that's not good for business, because if everyone's buying one car that's going to last forever, the business is going to die in 10 years. Now, that's kind of, I think, what Retroid are doing. They're trying to keep their business alive for as long as possible because they know, like I've always felt in my heart, that this retro emulation handheld scene has a shelf life. It's eventually going to be relegated to a few handhelds. And so that's my theory. You can argue with me in the comments. Now let's talk about this design, because my arch nemesis, Retrobreeze, said on social media that what the hell are they doing with this offset start and select and function button over here? And I tried to put that golden spiral of design on here to overlay to prove to him that he was wrong, and it didn't work. I'll try again for this video. But my point here is that, to me, there is just a wonderful flow of design here, and I'll try to get some good shots of just the way that they've done these subtle lines in this thing. To me, this thing is just minimalist perfection. It is beautiful, it is minimalist, it's done very, very well. And the way that they've done these lines and then created this front-facing speaker block over here and then put these buttons in the sort of corner of those lines, these lines flow with the bezel and kind of make the bezel look like it's meant to be there. It's not like an eyesore, like we all hate bezels. This looks kind of cool with these lines. You can say what you think in the comments, but I really think they absolutely nailed the design of this device, and it makes me wonder how they got the Flip 2 so wrong with these sort of, this is like very not subtle, these lines on the back, how they got the Flip 2 so wrong. Although the overall design on the Flip 2 I do like. I spoke in my video about it, that it's got sort of like a Germanic design, like a BMW car. So the overall design of it is great, but those subtle lines, well, not so subtle lines on there, I think suck. Whereas this is just exceptional. It is beautiful, and the plastic to the touch is really, really nice. And so just the overall design of this, these shoulder buttons, if you put it on the table, are sort of inline, which is really cool. And then moving over to the controls, we've got the classic Retroid D-pad. Now this is a dome switch D-pad. If you don't know what that is, there are little switches under each end of the D-pad. And so a membrane has got like a rubber contact that makes contact with metal circuitry, and that's how it makes the connection. This is an actual button that you're pressing on either end. Now they are precise, they feel good, they are a little bit noisy. And we'll talk about the noise now in a second, but what I want to move on to the action buttons. These action buttons are some of the quieter Retroid action buttons that we've had. But you'll see there, this is the A button. But now, if I move across to the Y button, I don't know if you can hear that, but that is the hollowness of the body. So I'm guessing the A button has got something behind it's blocking the sound. Whereas this Y button reverberates like hell. So I feel like maybe we could mod this, maybe put a bit of dampening in there, put a bit of like soundproofing in there and just stop that reverberation, because when I was sort of fiddling around with it in bed last night, doing a little bit of the ESDE setup and all that sort of thing, it was really loud, and it shouldn't be loud because these buttons are softer than the other Retroid devices. So that's a little bit of a letdown. Now the start, select, and the function button are all quite clicky. That's select, start, function, so that's all the same. And then your trigger buttons and shoulder buttons are quite clicky. Yeah, so very clicky, like a mouse click clickiness to it. Now just to go back to these action buttons, they are a nice sort of medium firmness. And like I said, if we can maybe mod it to reduce that clanginess, that reverberation through the body, these will probably be some of the best Retroid buttons we've ever had, and they've got a nice medium softness to them. So a very nice compromise there on the buttons. I really like them. Now, the elephant in the room is that this does not have any joysticks. And I think if you are looking for joysticks on this handheld, you're looking at the wrong handheld, because that's not what it's designed for. It's designed to be a Game Boy that can play other things well. So it's got enough power to play GameCube, but it is crippled by no joysticks. But therein lies the sort of beauty of it. So some games are going to work, some games aren't going to work, but you get this beautiful minimalist design. So there's always going to be a payoff somewhere. Now, where I do get a little bit pedantic is that they do have a virtual joystick setting under the handheld settings in the Android menu here. So I think it's in input there, yeah. And then there, enable virtual joystick. So we just disable that now. Now you have to go into settings to do that. Now Retroid do have this floating menu over here, and they should put the virtual joystick here. I know Neo have something similar on the Pocket Micro. They need to do it there. They just need to. That is an important thing for the developers to just get going, because you're going to be constantly switching that if you are into the 3D systems like N64 and all that kind of thing. You're going to be want to be toggling this PS2, unless you are just a NES nut like me. So let's talk about ergonomics, because as you know, we all want to be comfortable, and we got a bunch of options, but let's just talk about the sort of classic concepts, and then how this has lent on some of these and failed in some area, one area specifically. So this, the Retroid Pocket Classic, has gotten a little bulge from the Game Boy Color. And now the Game Boy Color, this bulge sits between your fingers, and then your fingers rest here perfectly, which is great. The problem here is this bulge is quite big and it's towards the bottom. And so if your fingers rest here at the back, like now the bulge is sort of between my two fingers, my thumbs are here. So that doesn't really work. It does help with the grip, but the bulge is okay. It's just not doing exactly what it was supposed to do. The other thing, actually, I'm going to use one of the modern handhelds to explain this, and that is the brick. What's this? The brickety brick. And because they have less space on this device, they focused on bringing these buttons up to the top so that when you hold it, the button's exactly where your thumbs are. Now, okay, the original Game Boy didn't do that either, but what the original Game Boy has in its favor is just chunkiness. So even though the buttons are a little bit low down, you just lower your hands and there's still plenty of chunk to hold onto. The Game Boy Color, kind of a similar concept. There's quite a tail on here, so your fingers grip onto it. Whereas here, it just doesn't work. Also, the thing is, this has shoulders. Now the shoulders have a beautiful sort of crest to put your fingers in. That doesn't help if your thumbs are sort of here. So you've got a few things working here. The screen has got it's long vertically, whereas the Game Boy, this tiny little screen, you know. This has a very long screen here, and so these buttons, what I'm getting at is these buttons needed to be raised to kind of flow with this long screen, the triggers at the back here, and then the bulge should have just come up further. It should have been a smaller bulge like here somewhere, or just, I don't know. I don't know what they could have done with the bulge, maybe just made it flat. Anyway, the bulge is nice because now if your fingers are there and the bulge is sort of gripping on your bottom fingers and the action buttons were just raised, the ergonomics would have been perfect on here. That being said, I've always said you're always going to compromise with a vertical handheld. The only vertical handheld that's kind of accomplished something is the Anbernic RG406V, which is just a chonker. It's ugly, but it does the job in terms of being an ergonomic vertical handheld. Now this is, like I've said before in this video, this is a perfect compromise, and it's not ergonomically perfect, but it does feel great to hold. It's got lovely plastic, it's not too heavy, and I've got to say, like, using it with this beautiful screen and that, like, ergonomics have not been at the top of my list. That being said, you never really get a good grip with this. Well, how I have held it is like this. I grip it between my palm, or like the top of my palms here, and then my fingers go here, and then triggers are secondary. That's kind of how I deal with the ergonomics. Now, a big issue, so if you haven't guessed, this part of the video is issues with the device, and the big issue is setup. Now, I know all Android devices suffer from this. All Android devices suffer from the fact that you have to sit and set this effing thing up. And this is not immune to that. What I did was I tried to go through and use their Retroid launcher. I thought, let's just give it a go. Now, the one big thing that the Retroid launcher has going for it is it runs a setup tutorial, like a starter guide, when you first open up the Retroid launcher. So I would recommend like filming that or taking screenshots of that, because those tips that they give you in the beginning are very helpful. The one tip they didn't give you is in how to change the emulator. And so you've just got to tap on the little edit icon and you can go to config, and under config, you can change the emulator there, because I did find I had to change the emulators quite often. And then I tried to like just put games in folders and get it to work. You've got to link up the directory, just like something like Digest Show or Emulation Station. Got to link that up. And then once you've done that, actually Emulation Station doesn't do that. Once you've got all that connected, I just try to open games. Now, N64 was the only system that just played without any issues. And then obviously you do need to open RetroArch, let it decompress, you need to download all the cores and all that sort of thing. So there was a bit of setup on the RetroArch side. There were a few other things I had to do. I had to swap the menu buttons because the menu buttons were reversed once I was in RetroArch, so I had to do that. And I had to map my own hotkeys. Now that definitely is something that they could have done pre-installed. My theory here is that I'm sure there's something they can do to create an image that they install in the factory that has everything ready to roll, and just a little sheet in the box just saying, okay, you need to do this, this, and this, and you should be off to the races. There should be something like that, because Gamma Core is pretty much preset. When you install Gamma Core, which is a Android community-made Android system, there's a lot that's already done for you when you open Gamma Core. Now obviously you're limited to the way that person wanted to set up everything, but that is what a lot of people who are buying Android devices want. It's one of the biggest gripes of buying Android devices. Oh my gosh, I actually sold it because I didn't want to deal with the setup. So there must be something that Retroid can do to make this whole process easier. You know, where you open it up, you just maybe open RetroArch, do a few little setup little things, and it's good to go. You know, Emulation Station has a thing in the setup guide, in the beginning, that links up to folders. And they've made that very, very seamless. So there must be something that Retroid can do to bring it all together and to make it easy for beginners. That being said, I am doing a setup guide specifically for this because I am excited about this, and there are a few tweaks specifically because of the square screen and the lack of joysticks. So I'm gonna do a setup guide specifically for this, so keep a lookout for that. Shake test. Silent. Crotch time. We'll do crotch time because I know you all really want to do crotch time. It's not the most pocketable device in the world. Like, look, that's quite sharp edges. I mean, it fits in your pocket. It's not a problem. But, yeah, not the most pocketable in the world. And then it's got a 5,000 milliamp hour battery. That is pretty damn big for this little device. And I'm put a post on my YouTube channel saying I'm trying to get this thing to die so I can do a fast charge test. And a lot of people were like, they've been playing for hours and hours, like 8 hours. I think one person was playing like PS2 and like 16-bit games, and they've 8 hours in and they still got 23% left. So the battery is going to do anything from like 15 hours all the way to maybe like 5-6 hours if you're just playing like high-end systems like Switch and GameCube. But my fast charge test, it does a maximum of 27 watts. And I got 1 hour and 15 minutes on a fast charge to full. So there you go. Not really sure how helpful a test like that is, but what it does tell me is that the sound is pretty good. Front firing speaker is great. And I think for this price and for what it's doing, I played a little bit of music as well. It's a pretty good sounding speaker. Now, for instance, the Retroid Pocket Flip 2, not such a great sounding speaker, especially for the price that you're paying. So I definitely think you're getting a decent sound from this. I was listening to, I think, a podcast, a little bit of YouTube, and I was putting it up somewhere while I was busy and I could hear it perfectly. So it is a good speaker for what you're getting. And you know, you're getting all the Android-y things like Bluetooth headphones, Bluetooth speakers work well with it. You're getting all of the things. You're getting them. Android, getting things. Spotify, stuff and things. Other things, more things. You know, Android, things. Android. So in terms of gaming, it was interesting because specifically for Game Boy, I layered 2 shaders onto it with no problems and no performance issues. But then when I got to SNES, NES, Genesis, if I put the G-Arm shader, the Beam shader, they all created slowdown to the point where it was a problem, where there was audio crackling and the game was actually physically slow. You could see it was slow. So you have to be careful what shaders you put on, which is odd. I guess it's because the GPU isn't as powerful on this chipset, but that is quite a big downside for a lot of people, so be aware of that. And then, you know, performance otherwise was just wonderful. I just want to recommend this Zoop game on Game Gear. Just lovely little game if you like little fidget games. Then PS1 has got good performance. Obviously, you run into trouble because there's no joystick for certain games. You can toggle that virtual joystick. Same issue with all of the other systems, the higher end systems. The big surprise here is that Sega Saturn plays quite well. And as you know, this comes in a 6-button layout. And so for the Sega Saturn people, this is probably the best option right now on the market. So Sega Saturn plays quite well. Not all the games play, and you do have to tweak it here and there and jump between different emulators, but it does play and it plays quite well. N64, pretty good gameplay. You're going to get a huge amount of N64 to work here. Again, you're going to have to map buttons and things to do certain things because the N64 had a whole bunch of buttons and joysticks. GameCube, I was surprised with GameCube. It was quite good. I used the Dolphin for handheld. I didn't play around too much, but I got some pretty decent gameplay. Metroid Prime 2 was very slow and didn't play, so that's always like my sort of high-end test. F-Zero played well. Drone Racers, which is a similar kind of game, worked well. Your mileage will vary. Don't buy this for GameCube. You are going to get a lot of GameCube games working on here, and they look really good on the screen. 3DS, I don't want to promote 3DS as a system that you should play on here. A lot of performance issues, but you can tweak and play around and you will get things going. For instance, Sonic World, which is a game that always plays well lately on all the chipsets, like the D1100 chipset on the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus worked fine, or Pro, whatever it's called, didn't work well here. It ran at 50 FPS and there was visible stutter in the game. So does this dethrone the Miyoo Mini Plus as the ultimate retro gaming handheld on the market? And bombshell, it does, because it performs better, the price is excellent, and it's one of the best designs to come out of this retro emulation scene to date.